We are going to begin in just a few minutes. And so I would ask if you have a seat to take it. Good afternoon. We're going to begin in just a minute. And I ask if you have a seat to please take it. Welcome. I am Reverend Adrienne Berry Burton. I have the honor of being a parent of two former graduates who are out in the world doing good things. I am the mom of the Longs, Raymond Long and Jessica Long. And so, yes, woohoo! And so it is my honor to be with you this day. It is my honor to be trusted with this moment in time. Amen. And so we will begin with a prayer. You who we call by so many names, we thank you for the beauty of this day. We thank you for the sunshine. We thank you for the laughter we have heard in this moment. We thank you for this life we will remember. We thank you for every blessing you bestowed on your son, Peter Bragdon. And so we ask you to send your Holy Spirit by this place and to the overflow rooms and wherever this service is being heard and seen and felt, that you will be with us. As you have promised, you hold every tear and every breath, and you are ours and we are yours. And so we thank you for all that is happening this day and ask that you will indeed hold and bless everyone. And this we ask with joy, and together we say, Amen. And so we're going to do some singing and some breathing together, as one of my friends would say. There are lyrics in your bulletin. And so the first we will sing is, Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. Praising you eternally. You may be seated. William and Catherine will come with reading.
You go first.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you to the entire community here. We are so touched by everything you have done for our father, your friendships, and thank you so much for being here today and being in his heart. We are sharing, you can't start yet. We are sharing this reading in celebration of Dad and our family land in God's country, as Dad would say, at Cranberry Lake in the Adirondacks, where Dad and his ancestors walked the pine needle paths every summer, as we have as well. This is an excerpt from a poem written by our grandfather, Henry W. Bragdon, and his fellow educator friends that they wrote it during one of their many camping trips.
Ballad of Nick's Pond. When I'm tired of cars and concrete, when I'm tired of roofs and walls, I long for that little bark lean-to, 6.5 miles beyond Sliding Falls. There's a ridge for the moon to come over, and it's covered with first.
So hard.
He did this on purpose. First growth spruce. I defy you to find such timber from Potsdam to Syracuse.
The trout there won't do for a trophy to hang in a rich man's hunting lodge. They may be small, but they're gamey, and they'll double your 4-ounce rods. There's no trail there for the stranger, but we blazed one part way, and I hope the gods will allow me to tramp it again someday. Thank you.
And now we will have remembrance for those who knew our Peter well.
Over a decade ago, Peter asked that when the time came, would I speak about his headmastership at Bragdon Academy. I said it would be a privilege. Well, the time has come, not sadly, but triumphantly. Peter said, I do not want tears. I want laughter and joy over a full life where my good fortune far exceeded my expectations. Peter was one of the most consequential and impactful headmasters in the history of the Academy. Peter was a brilliant leader who understood the critical elements required to be a great leader. Coupled with that, Peter was a talented educator who epitomized the master teacher of the boarding school tradition. Peter was born to be a teacher and grew up in the academic boarding school world. He knew what defines excellence there. The unique combination of his leadership skills, his understanding of the world of boarding schools, and his excellence as an educator enabled Peter to transform this academy from a good school to a great school. So let me start by recounting Peter's GDA career actually before it began. Peter returned home following his interview as a finalist for the headmaster's job at Govs, and Dottie asked, how'd it go? Peter replied, we don't have a chance. I put a tall trustee to sleep. That tall trustee, George McGregor, later told Peter that he didn't have to listen because he and Nuff Withington had already decided on Peter. Over the course of those internal trustee discussions, it's also reported that the president of the board, Skip Pescasolido, had noted that Peter was the most competitive person he had ever met, which only goes to prove one thing: Skip had never played golf with Dottie. The Governor Dummer Academy Peter and Dottie came to in 1983 had lost its way. It was rudderless and drifting. Peter described it as a defeatist culture that needed a turnaround to one of confidence and can-do. The vision was for GDA to be the best 7-day boarding school of its kind in the nation, and significant changes were going to have to take place across the entire community for this complete shift in culture. Let me give you some examples of the state of the school to which Peter and Dottie arrived in the fall of 1983. One important area of focus for Peter was the curb appeal. How a campus presents itself on first look says a lot about the culture of Academy. Early on, after a walk around, Peter commented to the business manager, Don Shampoo, that he had noticed a number of cracked window panes in some of the buildings. Don replied, "We do not replace window panes if only cracked." "We do now," said the new headmaster. Another conversation with Don had to do with the tall grass Peter had noticed on the formerly very steep slopes going down to the Byfield Bowl, now the Sager Bowl. Don explained that it was impossible to mow grass at such a very steep angle. Pete said, "Give me a rope and a mower and I'll have it done for you in an hour." Peter understood leadership. People in the community are always watching whether he or she knows it or not, and what he does and how he behaves impacts the behavior of others. When Peter walked around the campus, if he saw a scrap of paper, he'd stop and he'd pick it up. And students started doing that, and even more importantly, they would be careful not to drop anything in the first place. It was about taking pride in the community. Also during that first fall semester, a food fight broke out in the lunchroom in the dining hall. And to Peter's astonishment, not one faculty member got up to intervene. Of course, Peter handled it in no uncertain terms. The ringleader, a student with a nickname of Slug, can't make it out. He likely still recalls a dressing down he received in the headmaster's office. The message reverberated throughout the campus, and perhaps it reverberated more because Peter made sure the one-sided consultation he was having with Slug was loud enough to be heard outside through the door out to his buddies outside in the hallway waiting. So proper behavior and decorum, respect for oneself and the community was more than an expectation. Faculty were also in need of a reboot. In Peter's first 2 years, 17 faculty members were let go. That's about 35 to 40% by my calculation. And mostly the reason was that these teachers saw their job as a 9-to-5, which was completely out of step with the requirements of a 7-day boarding school. So 7-day boarding school, from week 1, he and Dottie established Saturday night open house at the Mansion House. All students, both boarding and day, were welcome. And for a school that prided itself for decades in being a home school, this actually provided a home for the students and a place to gather as a community. And importantly, on a Saturday night, right in the middle of what, for some students, could have been a long, lonely weekend. And of course, what this meant for Peter and Dottie was that for every weekend and Saturday night for the next 16 years, they were present on campus, leading by example. And I don't have the time to recall the many, many ways Open House impacted and changed this entire ethos of the school. It was from a pull away from the school on weekends to a force pulling students back onto the campus. And it was building a closeness within the community. You can imagine upperclassmen actually talking to the lowly freshmen. And accountability became a central aspect of the new culture as well. For example, Peter implemented an annual performance review of all faculty. And consequently, when the money started flowing in the door, the first salary increases ranged from 13% down to 0%. And those who got 0% knew what they had to do to improve. As a culture change, somewhere along the line in those early years, the old, somehow lost school motto, non sibi sed aliis, not for self but for others, emerged. That was a very fortunate coincidence for a headmaster who was trying to imbue GDA students with the importance of the concept of service toward the common good. Let me talk a bit about Peter and the Board of Trustees. Often, Peter would use his time at the beginning of the meeting to update the trustees on progress toward our goals, and there was always rapid progress. He was a coach in the locker room telling us where we had been, where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And occasionally he may have had on his rose-colored glasses, but it enthralled and energized us. It was a rocket ship of a ride. A walk around today still shows the tangible evidence with all the buildings that transformed this campus during the Bragdon years. It's too many to list, but let's just say the Buildings and Grounds Committee chairs, Shirley French, George McGregor, and then Jerry Mack and George Scharf, turned pretty much into full-time real estate developers and project managers. And I recall Shirley and Jerry looked remarkably stylish in those hard hats. And what else transformed? GDA's endowment. When Peter came here in 1983, the endowment was $5 million. In 1999, when he stopped being the headmaster, it was $60 million. Of course, these faculty salaries, the benefits, the buildings, the endowment required fundraising, and Peter was a great fundraiser. However, leading by example meant Peter had to make his own commitment. At the beginning of the first campaign in 1985, Peter contributed his life savings of $7,000 and pledged another $3,000 more, as he said, to put himself in a legitimate position to ask for major gifts. And ask he did. The game changer occurred at the beginning of the campaign. No prior campaign effort at the Academy in its entirety had gained more than $2 million. After GDA was selected as a finalist for the Keenan Foundation grant, Peter met the foundation in North Carolina and made a pitch for a $1 million grant. When Peter was leaving, Mr. Keenan took him aside to tell him that the Keenan Foundation was considering to make a grant of $500,000 to GDA. Peter replied, "If you have been listening to me, you know we are worthy of the $1 million." There was a long silence. "Mr. Keenan, we are making a good school great." 2 weeks later, GDA got the $1 million. Once Peter told me that the Bragdon family crest depicts a wild boar charging out of a cave. Peter thought that was pretty fitting. The Keenan grant fueled a campaign that eventually raised $13.8 million, followed a few years later by a $50 million campaign, and this changed everything. Thus far, I've been speaking about how Peter's vision and leadership skills completely changed the culture and the ethos of the Academy, but I've not yet talked about Peter, the master teacher. He loved being on this campus. He thrived on being engaged with students. It energized him. The fact that he knew each student by name and their story connected him to each of them. As he once said, "Over the years, the interruptions in my day are frequently more important than the schedule I planned." And I think the most important aspect that made Peter such a great master teacher was that he had what I'll call the touch. The ability to sense when a student was having a tough time, and he would take those kids aside for a chat and find out what was wrong and give some comfort and guidance. This sensitivity, this touch that Peter had is an extremely uncommon gift, even among teachers. So the foregoing gives a short list of the many changes Peter introduced and the impact on the culture of the community. Peter held a vision for GDA to become the best boarding school of its kind. He always advocated for setting seemingly impossible targets and dreams, requiring a powerful reach at the end, trying to achieve them. It was inspiring, and he was inspiring. He always put 110% of himself in any task, and GDA was transformed by his vision, leadership skills, and his personal touch to guide the Academy forward toward achieving greatness. Peter's immense impact on the Governor's Academy for the benefits of its students will continue forever. It's his lasting legacy, and all of us who share the journey with him cherish the memories. 3 days after his passing, I went to my mailbox and found a letter addressed in a very familiar hand. Upon opening it, there was a letter from Peter dated 2 days before he died, entirely handwritten, of course, and let me share a part of what he said. "I'm slipping rapidly. I might have mentioned to you I am relaxed about the approach of death, relying on the words of the Episcopal hymn, 'The strife is over, the battle won.' Even as he was physically failing, the handwriting is as clear and strong as the message. The message is strong and passionate as the man writing it had always been and was to the very end. Rest in peace, Peter Bragdon. Indeed, you have been triumphant."
For those who may not have a program, that is our Dan Morgan, and next will be Dr. Peter Quimby, head of school.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Dan. Dan, we're covering many of the same themes, but I'm approaching it from one who began as a student of Peter's, so a slightly different perspective. Welcome to Govs, everyone. I'm delighted to have you all here on this afternoon to celebrate the life of our dear friend, Peter Bragdon. The arrival of Peter and Dottie Bragdon on the campus of Governor Dummer Academy in the summer of 1983 marked a pivotal moment in the life of our school. and I do not state that claim lightly. Over the course of the last 263 years, our school has been led by 28 heads. But in Peter's 16 years leading the academy, he had an outsized influence on the trajectory of our school. One of the hallmarks of Peter's tenure included raising standards for students and for faculty, and raising money to add buildings and build the school's endowment. Mounting the school's first major capital campaign early in his tenure, Peter believed that the ability of the academy to compete with the finest schools in the nation was within reach, and he set about laying the foundation that would allow the academy to set sights higher. Under his leadership, the academy renovated and expanded the Schumann Math Science Center, and we built the Pescasolido Fieldhouse, the Pescasolido Library, and the Wilkie Center for the Performing Arts, all of which transformed the experience of students at the academy, which was the thing that Peter cared about the most. In my first year as head of school, Peter told me that Put Flint, a member of the class of 1937, had impressed upon him the importance of raising money for the school at every possible opportunity. And he had given Peter a tin cup so that he could ask for donations wherever he went. So, of course, Peter gave me my own tin cup so that I could keep the tradition going. And when we look at the beautiful campus that we enjoy today, it's clear that Peter didn't just carry that cup, he filled it to the brim. Peter also opened pathways to leadership for women at the academy, bringing Linda Fitzgerald, Kathy Guy, Elaine White, Susan Perry, Burt McLean, Janet Adams-Walls, Susan Olesko, Irna Okula, and many others into administrative roles. Of all of Peter's accomplishments, however, there is one that stands out most to me personally, both because of the impact that it had on me at the time and because of the way that it continues to shape my life today. During my first year as a student on campus, the Mansion House was essentially a mystery to students. It was a piece of the school's history wrapped in a quiet, formal mystique. Those of us who were students at the time knew that Jack Regal lived there, but it was completely segregated from the daily reality of student life. But Peter and Dottie changed all of that by doing something radical. They invited us in. By opening their doors every Saturday night, they transformed a hollowed, untouchable space at the center of campus into a warm and welcoming sanctuary, a place where the smell of Dottie's homemade fudge sauce and the sound of student laughter completely shattered the old mystique. With that single initiative, Peter and Dottie turned the Mansion House into a home away from home for generations of students and changed the culture of our school. Their willingness to hang out and have fun with students set a tone of familial joy that I have never forgotten. And it's part of the reason that Lori and I are so committed to carrying on this tradition for new generations of students. I have thought of Peter often this spring. When our community faced a profound loss, I felt myself leaning on the very lessons Peter taught me decades ago. In the fall of 2003, 8 years before I returned to Govs as head of school, I was dealing with a tragedy on a campus where I worked at the time. I wrote a letter to Peter, reflecting on how he had guided us through the pain of losing Heb Evans and a classmate during my senior year. I wrote to him then saying, I mention the passing of these students in part because your and Dottie's arrival at Governor Dummer in the fall of my junior year changed my life. While I wasn't aware of it at the time, you set an example for what it means to be a leader and for how an individual can shape and guide a community. When Heb Evans and Court Heist died, you led us through the pain and helped us know how to grieve. In fact, I can vividly picture talking to you in the dining hall after one of these events and hearing you describe how physically draining grief can be. and I've passed that same truth on to my students many times since then. Nearly 20 years later, I now find myself reflecting often on these and other lessons learned from you during your headmastership, and learning them again from the perspective of one who hopes to emulate that same strength of character and dedication to teaching that you modeled so effectively at GDA. Those words ring as true now to me over 40 years later as they did when I wrote them over 20 years ago. There is so much about my personal life and professional journey that have been and continue to be touched in profound ways by Peter's warmth, generosity, wisdom, and friendship, and I will be forever grateful to have had such an influential mentor in my life. Every Friday night when the doors of the Mansion House open, and every time I hold this tin cup, Peter's spirit lives on at the Academy. Well done, you good and faithful servant. Rest in peace, my friend. Rest in peace.
Amen. And so now we're going to stand and sing, and I have to get. Next, we will have reflections by David Quinn and then Chris Zimmerman.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to tell you how honored and humbled I am to be standing here today to be talking about Peter Bragdon, a remarkable man whose life has touched thousands of lives. And I've been a hockey coach for over 35 years, and you know, when you're in the coaching profession, you get used to speaking in front of big crowds, you get used to speaking in between periods to your team, you get used to speaking to the press, you get used to speaking to corporations and alumni, and through that process, you become way less nervous and you get more comfortable speaking in front of big crowds. Well, what I'm here to tell you today is I've been nervous for 6 weeks because I've never been in a situation like I am today to be able to talk about someone who meant so much to me. The first time I met Peter Bragdon was in February of 1980. I was in 9th grade playing youth hockey in Cranston, Rhode Island, and we went to the Kent school to play the Kent JV team. My father was a cop, my mother drove a school bus. Kent might as well have been in Guam because I had no idea where I was going. There was no internet, there was no cell phones. We were just going to play a hockey game, and little did I know what that day would do for me for the rest of my life. We end up playing the Kent JV team. The game ends. I come out to talk to my parents, and there are my mother and father talking to Peter Bragdon and Larry Piatelli, and it looked like a pretty passionate conversation. And as a 14-year-old, I kind of shimmer over there, and I'm sheepishly standing there, and I can hear Peter and Larry saying, "We'd love David to come to Kent," and da-da-da-da-da, and, you know, we'd like to talk to you during the week and maybe come visit you next weekend. So, you know, we make this conversation, and we get in the car, and I can see my father, who was an old-school Irish cop. There wasn't a lot of fuzzy-warmy with him, you know, kind of getting excited, and he didn't get excited about much. And, you know, all I kept listening to through the conversations between my mother and father is the impact that Peter and Larry made on my parents. And as you can imagine, as a 14-year-old kid, I'm in the back not really paying much attention to it. So the following Sunday, Peter and Larry show up at my house in Cranston, Rhode Island, 1,300 square feet. There's a school bus and a cop car out front, and they come on inside, and my mother is one of the few Irish women who can actually cook. She makes great Italian food. And we sat down and had a great Italian meal, and at the end of the meal, Larry and Peter start telling my mother and father that, you know, they'd love me to go to Kent. It was an official offer, and it would cost $600. And my father almost threw his shoulder out by shaking his hand, saying, "He's coming." My mother looked at him and said, "What, are you crazy?" And, you know, little did I know what that day would do for me. And, you know, one of the reasons I ended up getting into coaching is because of Peter and Larry. And I use Peter and Larry, I say that a lot, because for me, it was always Peter, Larry, and Jane, don't get me wrong. But, you know, when I went through a difficult time in 1986, I was diagnosed with hemophilia, my hockey career ended, and I went through some tough times. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And, you know, I just kept coming back to when I was going through the most difficult times in my life, the people I leaned on, and the people that meant the most to me, and the people that cared the most were my parents and my former coaches, Larry and Peter. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, I thought, boy, what an incredible opportunity and what an incredible honor it would be to be able to have that type of impact on people. And it really is the reason I got into coaching, and I might even be able to tell you it's the only reason I got into coaching. And I can't tell you that the impact that he made, not only on me, but thousands of other students that Peter has come across over his, I'm going to call it 70 years of education, because Peter never retired. We all know that, you know. He may have stopped going to an office every day, but he was an educator till the day that he died. And, you know, I remember Catherine calling me 3 or 4 days before Peter passed, and, you know, Peter didn't want any of this, right? He didn't want any services. He didn't want any acknowledgement. He wanted to just let life be, and, you know, and Catherine said, "I think I'm going to be able to talk him into doing something small." Something small. Well, Catherine's definition of something small is 3 services covering 3 states over 2 weekends. So, great job, Catherine. You were the only one that could do that, right? But one of the things about Peter is he had a gift that all great teachers and coaches have, and that is seeing potential, talent, and character in young people. What makes Peter's influence so extraordinary is that it did not end when you left St. Paul's, Kent, or the Governors. It was a lifelong influence. He made every student he had feel like they were the most important student in his life. He would not just be a presence in your life while you were at the school, it was a lifelong presence. From the handwritten letters every month to the post-game emails I would get, and he sent them every post-game. He watched every game I coached, and I would get a synopsis after every game, and he was pretty dead on. Even when I was in San Jose, when the games were at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, it never failed. I would get an email at probably 10 o'clock the next morning, and he would tell me what he liked and what he didn't like. To the Christmas cards I would get every year, he never stopped caring. The emails and letters were always filled with observations, encouragement, wisdom, thoughtful advice, and loyalty. And the Christmas cards, I mean, we all got them, from what I find out reading the obituary. And when we would get the Christmas cards, you would feel kind of special, right? When someone sends you a Christmas card, you're like, oh, Peter keeps thinking about me. And then I read the obituary, and I was one of 750. We are in a unique group because he's probably touched 750,000 lives, so not too bad. But who writes 750 Christmas cards? Peter Bragdon. Those letters and post emails became something I looked forward to. They reminded me that someone I deeply respected and loved was still paying attention and rooting for and helping me navigate through life's challenges. As the years passed, Peter's energy and passion for his students never slowed down. He celebrated your success, offered perspective during disappointments, and remained curious, engaged, and generous with his time. He had a way of making people feel seen, respected, and valued. When I think about Peter today, I think about the thousands of lives he changed because he cared and believed in you. I think about his honesty, his sympathy, his empathy, his selflessness, and his loyalty and character. Whenever you met Peter as a student, parent, colleague, friend, you got the same Peter Bragdon, thoughtful, principled, deeply invested in your well-being. 90 years is a long life, but Peter's legacy cannot be measured in years, but by the people's lives he has impacted. I know my life is better because Peter Bragdon was a major part of it, and I know I am not alone in saying that. I was incredibly fortunate to have great parents, and equally fortunate to have Peter Bragdon in my life for over 45 years. If he taught me anything, it is do not underestimate the influence you can have on people when you care about them and you make them feel valued and respected. And I can tell you in my coaching career, when I have lost that approach, I have not been the coach that I needed to be. You cannot underestimate the influence we have as human beings on other people when you make people feel valued and respected. And nobody did it better than Peter Bragdon. When you talked to Peter Bragdon, you thought you were the most important person on the earth. And it was sincere. A lot of people try to make you feel that way. Peter Bragdon made you feel that way because it was real and it was sincere. To Dottie, Bill, Chris, and Catherine, thank you for all the sacrifices you made in sharing Peter with us, with all of us. He was as unselfish a human as you could ever ask for, but in the profession that he was in, the family needs to be unselfish as well, because the sacrifices that he made were, you needed to go along with it, and you did. So you were equally impactful. We will miss him dearly, but we'll carry all of his life lessons with us forever. Rest in peace, Peter.
Wow. Nice job, David. My name's Chris Zimmerman, parent, proud parent, 2014 Govs grad, and also have several other connections here. In my senior year at Kent, our goalie was a freshman named Mark Whiston. And interestingly, Peter used to always apologize to me because Whist was not ready in his 9th grade year to be our goalie. But he did okay besides that. At the same time, Jane Piatelli and her husband Larry were just beginning their first year at Kent. And then in 2011, when my son Ted came here with Jane locally, with Peter and Dottie up in Exeter, things had come full circle. The support that Ted had on campus, as well as that he was getting from Peter and Dottie. What ties this group together and thousands of others like us is not a coincidence. It's a lifelong web of relationships grounded in team, grounded in family, and grounded in compassion. And at the center of that was the one remarkable man, Peter Bragdon. And so I don't forget, Dottie, first of all, thank you for being here. I know from my own life experiences, and I know from Peter, that the two of you made what he was able to do, and so much of the contributions that he made in so many lives. David, first of all, congratulations on being part of the historic gold medal in Milan and bringing the gold back to USA Hockey. It was, yes. McKinnon thought that too. Long before David and I had ever met, though, Peter kept me updated on David's coaching career with great pride. And he told a number of different stories. And then this morning, my son Ted shared with me one of Peter's letters, which often could be unfiltered on some of his views. And it included this observation from a 2025 note. I rejoice over the demise of the Rangers since they fired David Quinn. Quinn is an outstanding coach and human being. Now, Ted really had never met David, but he was finding out. It was vintage Peter. Loyal to his people, protective of his players, and never shy about sharing an opinion. I first met Peter as a student and hockey player at Kent. Some of the same experiences. And really, over the next 50 years, he became my coach, my mentor, my friend, and one of the most influential people in my life. What always struck me about Peter was no matter where we were in life, he was still always a coach, a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. I really had this amazingly good fortune. 27 years after graduating from Kent, my professional life took me to Exeter, New Hampshire. I was working for Nike, and the Bauer headquarters was there. And that was really, for me, where we deeply reconnected. And what I saw when I got back in front of Peter was nothing had changed. Helping young men become the very best versions of themselves that they could be was what he was all about. And he continued to do that in my life and in my family's in many different ways. And from that point forward, our friendship entered a deeply meaningful chapter. And yes, the letters started to come. Sounds like, Quinny, you liked you a little better. I didn't get them quite that often. But they contained thoughts about leadership, family, friendship, faith, and sometimes things that only Peter could think were absolutely essential for me to know. For example, a few years ago, I had a brief health scare. I had numbness in my arm. I went in the hospital, and thankfully everything was fine. But I got a letter that next week. Peter had heard about this, and he went into his guidance on heart health. Here's a suggestion he said: taking on a vegan diet, with the exception of fish and non-fat yogurt, would be a good idea for you. Avoiding dairy's not a big sacrifice. Italian food is delicious. He went on, he wanted to know if I had a good cardiologist, whether I was exercising. And then he also reminded me that he had become particularly enthusiastic about haddock, even more than salmon. It sort of makes me smile, but it really reflects. There were no boundaries in his coaching. Once he became your coach, he remained your coach for life. 2 weeks after Peter had passed, I went to my mailbox. And yes, I too saw the envelope with the all-familiar PWB, 171 High Street. And mine wasn't as long as yours, but Dear Z, thank you for always being a class act and a constant friend. With gratitude, love, and loyalty. Pete. One final letter. I'm sure there are others in this room. We have a collection of them. And Cranberry Lake always looked so special. I knew it was God's country, and I knew how much he loved it. Peter, thanks for all the coaching. With love and loyalty, we've got the far post covered. I love you.
And we have an opportunity to stand and sing and breathe together again on Eagle's Wing. Amen. You may be seated. And now, friend, colleague, Jane Piatelli.
Good afternoon. Writing letters was Peter's love language. And so today, I would like to share with you my final letter to Peter. It is a rare and special moment for Peter not to have the last word. Dear Peter, I often think of your life's journey like that of a train ride. You naturally collect and invite people into your life and onto your train. Sadly, some people must leave after a bit, while the lucky ones stay longer. Your bride, Dorothy Davidson Bragdon, was your loving companion throughout your entire journey. When she wasn't off playing golf, throwing ceramic pots, taking photographs. On your train ride, I see you being a loving partner, a dad, a grandfather, an uncle, a coach, a leader, a teacher, a mentor, a friend, and a role model to so many. I see you passionately leading a history class and coaching at Melbourne Grammar School in Australia. Then on to St. Paul's School, with your next stop at Kent School, where you and Dottie stayed for a while, raised your beautiful family, and forged deep and lasting bonds with your hockey players. I remember you, Dottie, Larry, and me taking a hike on a Sunday afternoon in Kent, and you talking about a little school in a little town in Massachusetts called Governor Dummer Academy. I see you graciously accepting the role as headmaster at Governor Dummer and the sheer excitement and joy you had in embracing this opportunity. As headmaster, I see you proudly attending all the school events and challenging students to be their best and do the right thing. I see you playing pool with students in the basement of Manton House during a Saturday night open house. I remember you sending those infamous notes to students. See me, PWB. As an invitation for a one-on-one conversation with you. Those of you who received those special notes know who you are. You continued to befriend and mentor young people. You took such great joy in watching the next generation of teachers and students continue to learn and grow at Govs. In your later years, I see you being the #1 fan of the Exeter High School Blue Hawks football team. I recall the stories and absolute joy you had being back riding the team bus and being in the locker room. During the lockdown of COVID, I see us basking in the sunshine on your deck after you, Dottie, Linda, and I had played croquet. I even witnessed you on some occasions let Dottie win. In recent years, you shared stories about your frequent visits to the hospital in Dover to receive infusions for medical treatment. Infusions of love given and received, as you took particular joy in getting to know the life stories of the nurses, medical and support staff, and you shared stories of your family with them. I cherished our daily phone conversations with you proudly updating me on Bill and Catherine and your grandchildren. You bragged about the energy and spirit emanating from Dottie. We talked about the Red Sox and the Giants, Quinny's hockey teams, world events, books we were reading, memories, history lessons you openly shared, updates on former students and players, the people you encountered each day, and so much more. Always the consummate coach and teacher, you taught us, through your example, how to embrace life and how to be a friend. No matter the personal or professional obstacles you encountered, you worked hard and found a way to embrace the people in your life. You touched so many lives and made us all feel seen, valued, and special. It is my privilege to have been on the train ride of your life with you, Peter Bragdon, for over 50 years. We have laughed, cried, listened to one another, shared stories, creating memories, and I never tired of hearing your stories. Oftentimes more than once. Right, Catherine? The memories, the stories, the love, the passion, I remember it all. I will cherish those times and hold them in my heart forever. It has been such an honor and a blessing. As the train has pulled into the station for your departure, Peter, those of us left on board will carry your heart in our heart always as we roll along. And so, my dear friend, I will sign off for now with deep gratitude, love, and respect. Here's to you, my friend, and stay young.
And we turn to sing, we stand to sing and breathe together, How Great Thou Art. and now Ellie Brown.
Thank you. Did any of us think we would get through Peter Bragdon's last Academy Assembly without a nature reading from the nature book? I think not. For the uninitiated, when Peter was head of school, he often delayed the end of morning assembly to read to us about the migration patterns of Canada geese and the mysterious appearance of the January thaw, or the appearance of spring peepers on the marsh. And you can imagine how well this was received by the student body. The pieces in this book spoke to Peter's general sense of wonder about the natural world, but what he really loved about this book was the way in which it tortured students. And, more importantly, he delighted in the ferocity of the resistance as students moved in their seats and coughed and crinkled paper and did all kinds of clowning. And in fact, members of the class of 1993 kidnapped the book with the aid and abetting of a certain someone who never passes up good mischief, Dottie Bragdon. Peter received ransom notes, many ransom notes. Nevertheless, he regaled countless audiences with that story. He delighted in the abduction of his nature book, and I think that story had far more mileage on it than any readings between this cover. I'm reading a piece today that I think Peter would have read at the most intense part of the spring semester, with commencement on the horizon, but with a great deal of work remaining before the end of the year. And I think it's fitting, as we come to a close in this service, that I ask you to pause for a few more minutes for a reading from the nature book. This is called Obvious as Sunlight, and it's dated April 26th. If spring were in the teaching business, which it isn't, we would now be hearing a basic lecture on philosophy. All the elements are there, spring after spring, and all we have to do is supply the words and attend their meaning. It is essentially a philosophy of life, of sentient being. It deals with beginnings and with continuity, and if we look for meanings, that is where we can turn. By the simple fact of being alive, we participate. For we are a part of the vast community of life which now responds. Spring is no accident. It is both a consequence and a reason, a quickening of forces as complex as a bud and as simple as flowing water. If we are aware of the wonder of spring, we must also be conscious of the inevitability it demonstrates year after year. If we are aware of beauty, which is a human interpretation, we must also see the basic order of life grown out of winter's discard and lifeless litter. For spring is change and growth and pattern imposing themselves on what we too often think of as random disorder. And perhaps most of all, spring is achievement. Here it is, spring, eternally new, eternally hopeful. And here are we, participating in a season which, year after year, gives the lie to all philosophies of chaos and futility. Thank you.
And we reflect on that with Morning Has Broken. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them bringing rest from the sweet the praise of somewhere from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of a bright garden, strong and tough leanness, where nothing else. Is the sun, that is the morning, born of newness of day. Praise with me, shout, praise every morning, God's creation of the new day. So I think we figured it out. It was probably 1992 when my Raymond Moses Long came for a visit. And I had not, now I've been hearing from Ike Suggs since we moved here in 1984, that that's where my children should be going. And so when we came a visit, I had not considered that my children would be anywhere in ninth grade except on the second floor, coming out of that bedroom. And so here we were. And I waited till all of the airs were moved away, and I said, so what do you think of this place? Yes! Oh, so now I have to think about it. And so, yes, we landed here. And part of why this mind for children, who I had not planned to release from my sight until they were 18 and in somebody's college, that it would be okay. It's because I had met the Bragdons, and they would be okay. Amen. There are these words from a song written by Stevie Wonder. As around the sun, the earth knows she's revolving, and the rosebuds know to bloom in early May. Just as hate knows love's the cure, you can rest your mind assured that I'll be loving you always. And from a later stanza, as today I know I'm living, but tomorrow could make me the past. But that I mustn't fear, for I'll know deep in my mind the love of me I've left behind. 'Cause I'll be loving you always, always, always. And so go out in that love, go out in that joy, go out in that way of being fully in this earth with all that you have been blessed with, knowing that when you are fully you, as our Peter was fully himself, someone who called himself after his great-grandfather George, an abolitionist of the things that should not be. Go out, courageously be, love poured out. Amen? Amen.